Hello everyone, nice to connect with people, and I hope you are well and happy and growing wherever you are. I am making today's video on the topic of taking care of your own needs. And for anyone who is new to this channel, my focus is on, I guess, mental health issues, perhaps diagnoses of mental illness, especially borderline and attachment trauma. But I'll always bring in a spiritual aspect to this. So that I see opportunities for mental illness as being an opportunity for great spiritual growth. So I tend to sort of entwine the two concepts, and hopefully you can come on this journey with me. If not, never mind, that's fine. We are each on our own journeys and paths, and things will resonate or they won't. So, look, I wanted to talk today, just hopefully briefly, we'll see how we go, about taking care of your own needs. So I've noticed that a number of people have been really helped by my Journey to Integration series, which is a video series on how to work with your inner parts, especially the inner child parts, which might have developed through traumas in your history and your childhood, and how to harmonize all those aspects, how to bring them together into a sort of a family within and love and take care of them. So some of the bumps along the road of that journey to integration would be this hurdle, this sticking point that comes up around your needs and where to get them met. So the tricky part about it is that the part of us that needs desperately connection with other people, and not just connection, but actually an all-embracing sense of being loved unconditionally. This desire is deep, deep, deep within us. It is the way that I conceptualize it, it's actually the thread that takes us all the way back to source energy, the thread that takes us back to where we've come from, our creative source, our divine essence, because in those realms we experience unconditional love. We are not separate, we are one with all. And I'm not just saying that because I've read it in some book. I have regular experiences of being at one with Source, and it's something that I'm able to now consciously work with, is Source energy and connecting to these parts of myself that remember what it is like to be completely loved. Now, the hard thing is we come into this earthly life, and the person who's supposed to, I guess, symbolize and represent that unconditional love is our mother. And if mother is not present, then father or any primary caregiver that is the first person to hold you close and is there when you cry, and that you connect with, and start to literally shape your brain as you look into that person's eyes, and you entrain your breath with their breath, and you pick up their energy, and as a little baby you're wide open energetically to receiving all of that information, that energetic information and physiological information that's coming from your caregiver. So let's just say, for argument's sake, it's the mother, right? Because for many of us it was mother. Now, for the blessed few who have an experience of feeling at one with their mother in the early years, you will have what's called a secure attachment in psychology. So you will feel secure enough with that love that she gave you that you can cultivate. What happens is you actually you basically sort of draw it from the mother and you cultivate it within yourself. And that becomes the center that you can always refer to in your life. This inbuilt, I suppose, a reservoir of compassion and love for yourself, and an ability to soothe yourself when you're distressed. And you tend to draw on this reservoir or this spring when you're most distressed in life. That's when you need it. That's when you turn to it. The rest of the time it's kind of unconscious. But even those people, right, who have this wonderful mother figure will also experience the pain of separation, because we're here on this earthly plane to experience separation from source, to experience ourselves as separate from everything else. So we have a body and we have clearly demarcated boundaries, and we can touch and feel things that feel separate to us, and we can interact with things that feel separate to us. So we're here for an experience of separation, and at some point it's going to be distressing for that child to leave the mother and go out there in the world and experience what it's like to be a human being in a separate body, in a separate universe, right? So that in itself is a type of trauma. Add to that an experience where mother is not giving you a wellspring of unconditional love and secure attachment. So mum might be, through no fault of her own, just incapable of providing that kind of all-encompassing love. It's always the case, if somebody can't give that, it's because they literally can't. They don't have it to give within themselves because they were never given it. So usually those types of mothers were unmothered themselves, and it's not so cut and dry. There's going to be variations with every single mother, bits of mothering that they're really good at, other bits that they're not. And on the whole, it should be enough. There's this concept in psychology called the good enough mother or the good enough parent. But in some cases it isn't good enough, and what happens is the child never develops the wellspring of feeling safe and secure in the world. So there isn't enough compassion coming from the mother. There's not enough soothing. There's not enough attunement to the little baby's needs. And so there's not a very good reservoir that's built up inside of you to draw on when you're distressed later on as an adult. So this is what I'm describing here is a primary need. It's a need for connection and to feel connected, and the mother represents source, the creative energy. So this need will stay with us our whole lives, that we need this connection. But if we didn't get enough of it as a child, we'll feel like we are like starving, that we are all gasping for breath, that there is never enough. And there's a perpetual hole inside of us that just cannot be filled. And, we will try to fill it with, all manner of, sabotaging behavior. One reason why people turn to drugs and alcohol is because drugs and alcohol mimic connection to source. So when we are connected to source, we'll feel really high and happy and expanded and amazing and creative and inspired and joyful. And what happens when you take drugs and drinking a lot? That's how you feel, at least for a while, right? There's always a big cost, but that's how you feel. So people who have that hole inside of them may be very drawn to things that make them feel high and happy, even in the short term, because the need is just so deep and so primal. So what do you do about this is, I'm sure, the question that's on people's minds. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, I definitely have that hole, and I wasn't given the need wasn't catered for when I was little. What do I do now, right? I'm an adult in an adult's body, and I can't run around looking for a mother, because that's, the time of receiving that kind of unconditional love is gone. Even though you may still be trying to reconnect with your mum in those waves now, we tend to always want that from our mother, no matter what, no matter how bad the mothering is. We'll still go for it. We'll still seek it. But where do you get that need met? Like, what's actually going to work here? Because this need can drive you literally insane. You can end up in all sorts of taking terrible paths in life. When I say terrible, I just mean that they lead you into dark places. So if you go into addictions, you can end up tangled up in all sorts of lies and debt and problems like that, and maybe even crime. If you don't take that path, you could easily go like the way that I did, which is towards a diagnosis of a severe mental illness, because your behaviour is so sabotaging and destructive. And as a result, of course, you become so anxious, or you become depressed, or it comes out in other ways. So yeah, it's really critical that we find a way to fill that need, because it will eventually manifest as some sort of problem in your life. Now, I want to make this as short as possible. So what I'm going to say is that it's a journey, and I'll show you a picture now, which I'll put up, which depicts the journey that I see us going on. And you may only be at the very beginning of this, and that's completely fine, or you might be able to travel all the way through this with me, see how you go. So in the beginning, what will happen is we will seek the need from other people, and that's really natural, right? It makes sense. We're living in a separate world and a universe of separation, or a world of separation. So we're going to look outside ourselves, and we're going to go at some point, okay, can't get it from perhaps my parents or my family or whoever it is you've been trying to get it from. So I'm going to look for it in places that are logical. Maybe I'll start therapy, and I'll try to form a strong bond with a therapist. A lot of us do seek it in our spouses and our loved ones, our romantic partners, and we may well get some of the need met in that regard. Some people have children and unconsciously try to get the need met for closeness from those children. People, essentially. I guess there's maybe other things we may look for it in. We might find a natural connection to nature that is satisfying for us. We may also try to get it met through work, through building a sort of status and a reputation, and people appreciating us and feeling valued. There can be a lot of different ways that we try to fill the need. But I say try because even though a lot of those things are useful, especially the healthy ones, so if you're working with a therapist, or you've got a loving husband or wife that actually is aware of what's going on in the dynamics and can help you, then that could be a valuable. It's kind of like training wheels, the way I see it, is you're working with someone who allows you to have such an intimate connection with them that for a short while you feel really fulfilled, really connected, really satisfied. Then that's going to it'll support you. It'll give you hope that it is possible, but it'll never be enough. So in my case, when I was working with trusted therapists who were there a lot for me, and I could see at one point I was working with somebody 3 days a week, which is intensive therapy. I was also able to get multiple hospital admissions when I needed it, and they were available on the phone, and so I had a lot of contact with these people. I also had a loving husband who was with me all the time when I needed him. But it was never enough. I always had to kind of want and seek more. And I noticed after a while that what was happening was I was getting into states of despair and distress, and then turning to them. And of course, they're not always there. These people cannot be there all the time. And I did have an insight, which was slightly embarrassing at the time, was that I realized I was kind of wanting to be, it was almost an infantile need. I was wanting to be very, very young and to be looked after all the time. Now, what is that but the mother-baby bond and the connection to source, craving that constant connection. So when I kind of clicked that it wasn't possible, I had to go through, a bit of a grieving period, and this doesn't happen linearly. What happens is you try to get the need met, you get disappointed, so you grieve, and then the whole cycle happens again, and you keep coming back to this. I kept coming back to this place of grief, of realizing that there's no one there. It's kind of what I had to accept. Was sometimes there are people there, and sometimes it feels lovely to be with them, but there's always going to be a time at 3 o'clock in the morning, or in the middle of it, whenever it is, that I'm suddenly get triggered or distress comes up for me, there's no one there. And what do I do at those times? How do I fill that hole? And that is where, in my drawing, if you're in that point of grief, you're at the nexus point. See, I've drawn like an infinity symbol, and there's a crossover point, a nexus, where you will turn within. And initially, every time you turn within, all you find is this grief. And it feels like there's nothing there that can help you. It's just blackness and shame and hurt and disappointment and anger and self-loathing and whatever else is there in your deepest heart. But that has to be, I guess, trusted, that hornet's nest of feelings, because as I surrendered into those feelings and I just allowed them to be there and I just sat with that, I'm all alone, almost sitting, I was sitting with my deepest fear, which is abandonment. I am abandoned. Something quite magical happened, which is that I started to turn. It was kind of like 180 degrees, like my drawing shows you, and by looking within, I began to open up the realm of the inner universe, the inner connection to all, the inner connection to source. So reality is all backwards here, and that's, again, it's part of the game of being here in this third dimensional reality, where we discount the reality within and we think that outside is all that there is, but actually inside is just as real if you learn to trust it. So inside I began to discover some really interesting things, and in the beginning it was just a wise kind of soft voice, that I don't mean an audible external voice, a voice within, just like an inner thought, that would say nice things to me, that would say, how about we just lie here and cry and let that be okay, or would you like a cup of tea now maybe, or that voice would sort of give me some counseling, I suppose, counseling within my own part, an aspect of myself looking after me. And sometimes I would even, stroking my hair was a really powerful way of soothing myself, and sometimes I would do that, and I would also imagine that an angelic being was coming to visit me. In the early stages, when I worked with my imagination, I would imagine therapists or people that I trusted, or angels that were external. But after a while, I realized that these aspects are really me. They're a part of me, and they're coming to help me. So initially the stuff works on imagination, and you will feel like there'll be another part of you going, this is just rubbish, this is not real, the people out there are real, but what's happening inside me, that's just my imagination. So it's quite easy to discount if you live in a Western culture, which perhaps many of you do that are watching my video, I don't know, but easy to discount what is within. But again, I just kept trusting it and kept working with it and developed different ways of communicating with my inner self. Some of those I've talked about in the Journey to Integration video, which is things like journaling and writing the letters to myself. I then started a lot of visualization exercises where I began to do inner journeys to connect with these parts of myself. And the more I surrendered to the process, the more the experience became real within me and really, really satisfying, because I suddenly realized that I was starting to get excellent advice, like from within. This advice was coming. Not only was I getting really good advice, I was also getting a sense, a feeling of being safe, of loving myself, of compassion, and all the things I've been craving from other people was starting to develop within my own being and psyche. Again, I just kept trusting it, and I'm talking of probably it's almost a lifetime practice, but intensely working with this stuff over maybe about a 4 or 5 year period, to the point now where the experience has increased exponentially, so that I'm now secure in my attachment to my inner world. The inner world has become very, very satisfying and rewarding in a way that the external world has never been. And I've been able to connect to source, which I was beginning to speak about at the beginning of the video, which is all that is. And all that is comes to me as what some people would call the higher self, or angelic beings, or voices from within, images, metaphors, guidance, synchronicities, all sorts of magical stuff is generated from this inner world that we can turn to. But all of those things, as separate as they seem, are not separate. They're all coming from Source, and I am a part of Source. So when I'm connecting with that, I know I am connecting with all. There is no separation in this realm. It's it's really hard to explain, and I'm imagining that there'll be some people scratching their heads right now who are very whose experience is still very grounded in third dimensional separate reality. And there's other viewers who, you guys will be all over this. You'll already be very connected within, and perhaps already working with meditations and visualizations and shamanic journeying, or whatever techniques that you use to begin to connect. So I've made this video to reassure people that feeling of not having your needs met, and sitting then with the grief that can cause, and then going into that opens up a whole nother resource for you. And this resource is the one that I think has now set me up for a lifetime of I suppose liberty, of feeling free, that I don't need anything external to myself now. Yes, stuff will happen and affect me and upset me, but I'm really grounded. I found that wellspring within that will never let me down. Never, ever. It doesn't matter what happens. That is something I have cultivated, and no one can take that away from me. That's really powerful. That wellspring is not under anyone else's control but mine. Everything else in this world can slip through our fingers, can change, can die, can disappear, can let us down, can disappoint us. But once you have that wellspring, you will always be able to rely on it. And that being able to rely on it is what will give you the sense of safety and the security that you probably were missing because of childhood and because of being human. It's just a part of how things are in this world. And finding the resource within is a part of our spiritual evolution. So even if you haven't experienced the intense mental and psychological pain that comes from feeling abandoned and having attachment trauma issues or complex trauma, hopefully this will still resonate with you, because in a way we're all on this journey to discover this resource within, the God within, divinity within. So I really hope this was useful. I might also make another video soon on basic shamanic journeying, like how to do some visualizations that will take you deeper into this inner world, to help you explore it, because it's such an exciting place. It's that life becomes really magical when you start to tune into it. So wherever you are on that journey, I'm wishing you so much love and blessings for insight and growth and gratitude to be with you, and so that you may be at peace as soon as possible, because I guess that's what we all want, right? Just to be at peace and just to be happy. So I'll leave it there, and lots of love to everyone. Namaste.